who have come to hear a quality, data-driven talk are going to be very disappointed, I'm sorry to tell you. I really do want to talk about, is more better? Because really, the most common question I get now from family, from friends, from neighbors, is really the question about mom, dad, they're having trouble at home, they're not safe anymore, we need to do something to keep them safe. My patients that I used to have would come in and say, my children are worried about me, I'm fine, I know I might fall, I know I might hurt myself, but that's okay. I've lived a long life, I've seen my kids grow up, I've seen my grandkids, my friends have died, I'm ready to go. I don't want to go through this. And can you help me prevent my kids from taking away that sort of dignity, the quality of life, make me get care or go to places I don't want to do? And so the issue really is, do we always think about more is better or not? Which leads me to think about, and I've had this with my own family. My dad, he's 85. He's a stubborn guy. And for the last couple of summers, he does everything himself, very independent, likes to work outside, using his hands and doing things. And he has been banging his shins. He's on Coumadin. He gets big hematomas, and they've gotten infected. He's been in the hospital the last 3 summers. And we're all like, Dad, you can't go outside anymore. You got to wear shin guards. You got to do something. But to him, that is worse than death, to not be able to go out and do that anymore. And I find myself doing the exact same thing with my dad that I'm actually going to talk to you about. It's a very hard thing to balance this idea of safety against sort of the quality of life and what's going on. Which really leads me to reflect on, as a health professional, what is our job and responsibility? Is our job just to keep people alive longer? Or is our job really to figure out how to balance the care and their quality of life and really meet their overall needs that are out there? It leads me to reflect back as I was thinking about this presentation on the Hippocratic Oath, and I have to read it to you because it's been a long time since I said it when I graduated from medical school. I will use treatment to help the sick according to my ability and judgment, but never with a view to injure and wrongdoing, which has often been distilled down to the phrase of do no harm. And the challenge, though, with this is, as it says here, with a view. I think all of us are well-intentioned. We want the right thing for our parents, for our neighbors, for our friends, for the residents, the patients, and individuals we care for. But how do we manage and challenge and take care of that? But somewhere along the line, we moved away from the sort of quality of life issue to really emphasizing and prioritizing quality of care. Somewhere along the lines, we've defined quality of life as the absence of medical conditions, not having falls, not having pressure ulcers. Our care plans actually are all written about avoiding bad things from happening, not about what the needs of the individuals are and what they like and issue. And as a result of this, we've seen a tremendous amount of churning at the end of life. What we see is, starting in the hospital, about 20% of those individuals discharged from the hospital, elderly, are going to go to a SNF. It's about 2 million Medicare beneficiaries, 4 million total people when you include managed care, commercial insurance, and Medicaid. Of those, about 1 in 4 are going back to the hospital, who are then coming back out to the SNF, going back to the hospital, or in this vicious loop going back and forth. If you get out of that loop, about half are able to get out and go home or to assisted living. But about 20%, or 1 in 5 of those, are coming back to the emergency room and going back to the hospital. If you can't get home and you go over to a traditional long-stay resident, about 1 in 5 of those individuals are coming back through that cycle and getting back in the loop. There's just tremendous churning. And as a result of that churning, what you see is a third of the use of long-term care. Elderly, only about a third of them use long-term care, but they account for about 87% of the costs. This is a slide from 2007, but it holds true today. What you can see is there were about 6 million enrollees in Medicare back in 2007. Only 18% of them used long-term care services. Of those, 65% of their costs. The total, if you added in home health, you had 87% of the costs were there. And I'm not talking about the costs here. This is about individuals. To have costs means you are using a lot of health care. And this churning is creating and using a lot of health care. But to what end is it really helping? Here, if you begin to look at a different way of looking at this, this is thinking about rehospitalization as a marker of end of life. So here, this is a study that followed elderly individuals who were hospitalized in the United States and followed them for a year. So along the horizontal axis, you can see 0 to 365 days. Along the vertical axis is what percentage are alive at any given point. So if everyone lived a year after being discharged from the hospital, the line would go straight across the top. The dashed line goes down slowly, and you can see that for most people after they're discharged from the hospital are still alive a year later. But another way to look at it is 10% have died. There's a 1 in 10 chance or 10% mortality risk of just going to being hospitalized as an elderly in this country. The solid line are those people who are starting to get in that churning loop. And you can see within the first 100 days, it's dropping down dramatically. It still goes down, but a year later, 35% have died. 3 out of 4 people who were rehospitalized in this country die within a year. It's a 35% one-year mortality risk. If I gave you all, I just randomly opened up a medical textbook and randomly assigned diagnoses of cancer to all of you in the room, there are very few diagnoses that have a one-year mortality risk of 35%. This is worse than getting a diagnosis of cancer. Yet, how do we have this discussion about this? It reminds me of a story of in the Amazon, there's a tribe that's a cannibalistic tribe. 3 anthropologists go down into the Amazon, and they get captured by the cannibalistic tribe. And they're put in the hut, and the tribe gets together, and they get the big fire going, a big pot out there, and they come in and they say to the first individual, would you rather die by chi-chi or die by burning? And of course, no one really wants to be burned to death alive, and so the first anthropologist takes death by chi-chi. And they take the individual out, there's all this screaming and just horrific noise, and then they come in to get the second individual. They ask him, would you like to die by chi-chi or by being boiled to death? And doesn't want to be boiled to death. He says, chi-chi can't be as bad as that. Takes it, he goes out, and again, just blood-curdling screams, goes on for a while, torture and everything else. Third individual, chief comes in, takes the third individual and says, would you like to die by beating or by chi-chi? And now he's seen 2 of his individuals go through this. He's heard all the horrific stories. There's no way he's going to go through chi-chi. So of course he says, I'd like to die by beating. And the chief says, great, but first a little chi-chi. That churning and everything else, that's what I feel like we do with our elderly, is you're going to die, but first, let's give you a little chi-chi. And you go through that process over and over again. And it's not just about living or dying or not. Here's a graph looking at functional status. So this follows same people over time, and it's comparing people who get elective surgery versus people with chronic disease. So the green line are people who get elective surgery, replacing a hip or a knee, and the blue line are people with chronic disease. And in the middle, you can see when they get hospitalized, their functional status drops way down. Now, it makes a lot of sense. You look at it. People who have elective surgery tend to be healthier than people with chronic disease, so they have a little bit higher function. They're declining a little bit faster before their surgery because they're getting usually their hip or knee replaced because they can't move around as much. And lo and behold, if you fix a mechanical problem, people usually get better, and you can actually see their functional status comes back a little bit better than the trajectory. Chronic disease, you never see that. And this is what I saw with my patients. I think we all see that with our residents. They go to the hospital. The hospital treats the heart failure, treats the COPD, treats the cellulitis, treats the sepsis, but the individuals come back worse. They come back usually with a delirium, with a Foley, more debilitated, maybe with a drug-resistant infection, and they never, ever get back to baseline. Yet, we often say, we can make you better by sending you to the hospital. Well, making you better, what my patients and families hear, and what even my own family now hears, when you hear, I can make you better, it's not that you make you better, it's really that you're not going to die. That's what sort of the message of the healthcare system is. It reminds me, I had surgery on my knuckle several years ago. And after I got out of the surgery, I said to the hand surgeon, I said, how did it go? And he said it was great and worked really well. I said, good. Am I going to be able to play the piano? And he said, yep, you should have no trouble playing the piano. I'm like, great, I couldn't play before. But that's what a lot of our families hear. Individuals come in, they've been on a walker for 10 years, and we say we're going to make you better with a little rehab and everything else. They think they're going to go home with no walker. They're not going home with no walker. And there's a mismatch in our communication with the individuals they have out there. And so this really sort of leads to this idea, this broader idea of how are we addressing their needs? So if you ask community elderly, they really show a strong aversion for nursing home or going on anywhere. About 30% of them actually say they'd rather die than go into a long-term care facility. Many of you have probably had your family members swear to you on the Holy Bible not to put them in a long-term care facility. Yet, in contrast, family members and daughters and sons are always calling me and saying, Mom or Dad is getting to the point that they are not safe at home, and we need to put them in a facility, or what can I do with them out there? And this really leads to this broader concept of surplus safety. And surplus safety is really where we prioritize the safety and the sort of the quality of care over the quality of life for the individuals. Now, wrapping our children in a bubble may protect them from injury, but what expense? You really can't sort of address that issue. And so we have this case all the time. In our facility, we have individuals who might be at risk of aspiration pneumonia, and we put them on honey-thickened liquids. Have you ever tried to drink honey-thickened liquids? It is disgusting. And you'll have people beg you not to have that. They would rather die than drink honey-thickened liquids. And they can clearly explain, I'm okay with the risk of getting pneumonia and dying, but I don't want to spend the last days of my life trying to suck down honey-thickened liquids. We used to do this with restraints. We restrained people so they wouldn't fall and injure themselves. We put peg feeding tubes in elderly dementia so we can keep feeding them. Turns out that doesn't work either. And so how are we doing things all the time that we think we're trying to help people with them? The system reinforces it. The survey system reinforces it. The liability system reinforces it. The reimbursement system reinforces it. It all reinforces this concept of sort of a surplus safety as we go forward. What we really need to be thinking about is sitting down and talking to our individuals about what they want and balancing it. And I would encourage you, if you haven't read Atul Gawande's book on Being Mortal, it's a wonderful book that really goes through this, and it talks about his relationship and his discussion with his dad about end-of-life issues with what he wants out there, and balances the issue. And I'm not going to do it justice, but his book really distills down to 5 central questions. And imagine if we really sat down with the individuals we care for at admission and went through this, what the care plan would look like differently, how would we try to take care of them, what would we make decisions that are differently? So understanding, what is your understanding of where you are and your illness? People all the time don't understand what they have. I have people come in and say, I don't really have, I don't really have cancer. They just said I had a tumor and I need to get a little bit more radiation and chemo. Well, but that's going to affect, they don't think they've got cancer, because then they're planning and having a very different planning issue out there. What are your fears and worries about for the future? What are your goals and priorities? What are your outcomes that are unacceptable to you? What are you willing to sacrifice and not? I want to make it to my daughter's wedding. I'm willing to tolerate a lot of pain, and I'm willing to do this. Or, I've lived a long and happy life. I don't really want anything anymore. And what would a good day look like? Good day looks like this? Well, then why aren't we trying to meet what a good day looked like for a lot of our residents that are out there? I've had these discussions with my parents. Now, my dad, as I said, very proud man, does not like people taking care of him, very independent. You do not want him in your building. Trust me. But he has made it very clear, so I'm actually a durable family. We've had these discussions. We've had these discussions in the summer, sitting on the deck. really, calm. It's not 2 in the morning, it's not on the weekend, but really been able to have these discussions so I know what type of decisions I'd have to make if he can't make those decisions. And he does not want aggressive care. He doesn't even want antibiotics if he has an infection. If the decision is that he's likely going to end up in a debilitated state where he has to be in one of your facilities, no matter how wonderful they are, that's it, he doesn't want it. And so it's very clear. Now, that's not what I would make for him. And it would be really hard it's going to be really hard for me to make that decision. My mom, on the other hand, she's going out, getting CPR, chemo on a vent. Now, I've told them that I use them sometimes when I tell this story. I use them in the story, and my mom's like, that's not true. That's not true at all. You're mischaracterizing me. And I said, well, Mom, if you were really sick and there's a small chance you might get better, and you're on a ventilator and you're like, she's 85 and everything, she's like, well, yeah, of course I want to get better and I want that. I'm like, well, Mom, that's what you want. Now, I wouldn't do that for my mom either, but having the discussion, I'm not saying that we should make everyone DNR, do not hospitalize, and we're doing too much. We need to sit down and have the discussion with our individual, with the patients, with our family members. What is it that they want? What is their understanding of their illness? What are they afraid about? What do they want to do with their goals, and really understand? And when you do that, it really will transform how we do the care plan. In Boston, a facility in Boston actually did this, where everyone who had rehospitalization in their facility, they brought in and had a palliative care consult. And the consult didn't start out with a Chinese menu of pick what you want on the order and what do you want, but really sat down and talked to them about these 5 questions. And as a result, then you can have the discussion. My dad? No. My mom? Yes. Had that discussion. They cut rehospitalizations by 20%. They increased the number of people who were discharged home, and people were more likely to die either at home or in the facility rather than going back to the hospital to die. So I think the right thing for us to do is to go back to our roots and remember what we're there. And while we think we're doing it for the best interest, it's really about talking to the families and understanding what they want, and then making the decisions that help guide that. And that way, we'll avoid a little chi-chi with the elderly out there. So thank you very much.